Imagine if the unending battle over Palestine was part of a divine prophecy, one that no political solution, peace treaty, or negotiation could resolve. What if this ancient land isn't just a contested territory, but a sacred, preordained battleground in a much larger spiritual narrative? Over the centuries, powerful empires have laid claim to Palestine. Leaders have tried diplomacy, treaties have been signed and broken, and solutions have been drafted, yet lasting peace remains elusive. But what if this struggle, which defies all attempts at peace, is no coincidence? What if the reason this land is so fiercely fought over is because the battle is not just political, it's spiritual? According to the Bible, the conflict over Palestine wasn't meant to be solved by human hands. In fact, it was foretold thousands of years ago. Prophecies in the Bible hint that this small land, known in ancient times as Canaan and later as Israel and Palestine, is more than just soil. It's a piece of God's divine plan. From the beginning of human history, this land has been at the heart of spiritual battles, divine covenants, and promises made by God to his people. This is a land marked by conflict, prophecy, and fulfillment. If we look at the history and the prophecy embedded in the Bible, we'll find that the story of Palestine and its ongoing struggles may be preordained. In this video, we're diving deep into the Bible's portrayal of Palestine. From ancient Canaan to the creation of Israel, from the rise of empires to the prophecy of end times, we'll uncover the hidden spiritual significance of this region. We'll explore what ancient texts say about the destiny of Palestine, its connection to divine promises, and why it remains a focal point of modern-day tension. This isn't just a political battle, it's a battle of prophecy. Stay with us as we uncover the biblical origins of Palestine and reveal why, according to the Bible, the fate of this land may already be sealed. You'll see how every event and every struggle surrounding Palestine is part of a much larger, divine purpose that goes beyond human understanding. Our journey into the biblical history of Palestine starts thousands of years ago in a place known as Canaan. Canaan was a land inhabited by various tribes long before the arrival of the Israelites. These early inhabitants, collectively called the Canaanites, practiced a religion and lifestyle that the Bible describes as deeply opposed to the values upheld by the God of Israel. According to the Bible, God made a covenant with Abraham, a promise that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. This divine promise was not a mere territorial transaction. It was a monumental, prophetic declaration that would shape the future of Abraham's lineage and establish a connection between the Israelites and this land that would last for millennia. Genesis 15 verse 18 records God's words to Abraham, "To your descendants I will give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates." But there was a divine condition attached to this promise. God told Abraham that his descendants would not take possession of Canaan immediately. The reason? The sins of the Canaanites had not yet reached their full measure. This cryptic statement indicates that Canaan's moral decay would reach a peak before Israel would be allowed to claim the land. This set the stage for a future conquest that was both a fulfillment of a promise and a divine judgment. The Canaanites were a collection of different tribes, each with its unique practices and beliefs. They worshipped deities like Baal, Asherah, and Moloch, and engaged in rituals that were an abomination to the God of Israel, including human sacrifices and temple prostitution. In the eyes of the Israelites, Canaan represented moral corruption and defiance of God's commands. Their presence in this land was seen as a contamination of the sacred soil that God had designated for his people. When the Israelites eventually entered Canaan under Joshua's leadership, they were not merely claiming territory, they were enacting a divine judgment and fulfilling the promises made to their forefather Abraham. The conquest of Canaan, described in the book of Joshua, was viewed as a spiritual mission, a holy war meant to purge the land of its moral corruption and establish a nation dedicated to God. However, this land was not merely a battlefield, it was a covenant land. God intended for the Israelites to live here as a holy people, set apart from the practices of their neighbors. Canaan was to be a place where Israel would follow God's laws and serve as a light to the nations. This covenantal relationship with the land created a unique connection between the Israelites and Canaan. The land was not just a home. It was a sacred inheritance with deep spiritual significance. Yet, even after taking possession of Canaan, the Israelites struggled to uphold their covenant with God. Time and again, they were tempted to adopt the customs of their neighbors, engaging in idol worship and abandoning the commandments. The Bible records that these spiritual failings brought about periods of oppression by neighboring tribes, who often acted as instruments of God's judgment. The Israelites' repeated lapses into sin and idolatry led to a cycle of judgment, repentance, and redemption that would define their relationship with Canaan for generations. The land of Canaan, today known as Palestine, was thus more than just a geographical location. It was a place of prophecy, a land of divine inheritance and judgment. Its spiritual significance was established long before the Israelites set foot there, and it remains a place of deep historical and prophetic importance. The story of Israel's relationship with Canaan reaches a defining moment with the conquest led by Joshua. When the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into Canaan, they were not merely entering a new land, they were fulfilling a divine covenant. This was the moment when God's promises to Abraham were coming to life. Israel was finally claiming the land promised to their ancestor, a land that was meant to be a holy sanctuary, a place where they could live according to God's commandments. The conquest of Canaan is depicted in the Bible as a holy mission, where Israel is called to drive out the Canaanites and establish a society based on God's laws. This was not a mere land grab, it was a sacred act. The Israelites believed that the land was meant to be pure, free from the pagan practices that had defiled it for centuries. The conquest of Canaan is, therefore, presented as both a fulfillment of God's promise and an act of divine judgment against the Canaanites. But Israel's journey in Canaan was fraught with challenges. The land, which was intended to be a place of peace and holiness, became a battleground, not just against other tribes, but against the Israelites' own tendencies to stray from God's commands. Time and again, they were drawn to the idols of their neighbors, tempted by the allure of pagan rituals and foreign deities. This led to periods of spiritual decay, where Israel would abandon their covenant with God, leading to cycles of conquest and oppression by neighboring tribes and empires. Each time Israel strayed, God allowed foreign nations to rise against them. As a form of divine correction, the book of Judges, for instance, describes this repeated cycle of sin, judgment, repentance, and redemption. Whenever Israel cried out to God for help, he would raise a judge or a leader to deliver them from their oppressors, reminding them of their covenant and calling them back to faithfulness. This cycle established a pattern that would define Israel's relationship with Canaan, shaping their understanding of the land as not just a home, but a place of divine testing and spiritual discipline. The story of Israel's struggles in Canaan is not just about ancient battles. It is a lesson in the challenges of remaining faithful to a covenant. For the Israelites, the land of Canaan was both a gift and a responsibility. They were called to be a holy people, a nation set apart, living in a land that was meant to reflect the purity and righteousness of God. The land itself was a constant reminder of their relationship with God and the consequences of forsaking His commandments. This covenant relationship with Canaan set the stage for the ongoing struggle over Palestine, a land that remains central to spiritual and political conflicts to this day. The Israelites' story in Canaan reveals that this land is not merely a territory. It is a place where divine promises, judgments, and prophecies converge. The Philistines, one of Israel's most notorious foes, would play a significant role in the ongoing conflict over Canaan. Originating from the islands of the Aegean, these seafaring peoples settled along the coastal plains of Canaan and established a powerful confederation of city-states known as Philistia. These cities, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath, formed the heart of Philistine culture and identity, which eventually gave rise to the modern term Palestine. The Philistines were not merely military rivals to Israel. They represented a direct spiritual opposition. The Philistines worshipped gods like Dagon, Baal, and Astarte, engaging in practices that stood in stark contrast to Israel's monotheistic worship of Yahweh. Their presence in Canaan symbolized a constant threat to the purity of Israel's worship, challenging the Israelites to remain faithful to God amidst a culture of idolatry. The story of David and Goliath encapsulates this struggle. In this legendary battle, Goliath, a Philistine giant, taunts the Israelite army, challenging them and mocking their faith. David, a young shepherd, steps forward not with a sword but with faith in God, declaring that God would deliver him from Goliath's hand. David's victory is more than a personal triumph. It symbolizes the triumph of divine power over pagan might. This iconic confrontation highlights the spiritual dimensions of Israel's battles with the Philistines. Despite their eventual decline, the Philistines left an indelible mark on the land and its identity. After the Roman Empire conquered the region and sought to erase Jewish identity from the land, following the Bar Kokhba revolt, they renamed the land Palestina, drawing from the ancient Philistines. This name persisted, becoming the term we know today as Palestine. The Philistines' legacy is thus more than historical. It is symbolic of the spiritual struggle that has always defined this region. Their presence and eventual assimilation into the region left a cultural and spiritual imprint that resonates to this day, making the land of Palestine a place where ancient enmities and divine prophecies intersect. As we move through history, we see that Palestine was not only a land of biblical significance, but also a valuable prize for powerful empires. From the time of the Babylonian Empire to the rise of the Roman Empire, each occupying power left its mark on this region, further complicating its spiritual and cultural landscape. The conquest of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586 BC marked a critical turning point in the story of Palestine. The Babylonians, under King Nebuchadnezzar, captured Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled the people of Judah to Babylon. For the Israelites, this event was more than a military defeat. It was a profound spiritual tragedy, as it disrupted their connection to the Promised Land and forced them to confront their covenant relationship with God. The exile, however, was not the end. 70 years later, the Persians, led by King Cyrus, conquered Babylon and allowed the Israelites to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This return and rebuilding were seen as a restoration of Israel's divine relationship with the land. Yet, the Persian Empire's presence in the region introduced new influences and relationships between the Israelites and their neighbors, particularly with emerging cultures that would shape the future of the land. Following the Persian Empire's rule, Alexander the Great and his successors, particularly the Seleucids, took control of Palestine. The Seleucid rulers imposed Greek culture, language, and religion, which led to increased tensions within the Jewish community. Many Jews resisted these influences, clinging to their ancestral traditions and beliefs. The Maccabean Revolt, which followed, was a direct response to this cultural and spiritual clash. This revolt ultimately restored a period of Jewish autonomy, but the balance of power in Palestine continued to shift. The arrival of the Roman Empire in the 1st century BC brought a new and powerful player to Palestine. The Romans, who conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC, established a period of occupation that would last for centuries. During this time, Palestine became a part of the larger Roman Empire, leading to increased tensions between the Jewish population and their Roman overlords. This tension reached a peak with the Jewish revolts in AD 66 and AD 132, both of which were brutally suppressed by Rome. After the Second Revolt, known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt, the Romans renamed the region Palestina in an attempt to erase Jewish identity from the land. The renaming of the land to Palestine was more than a political act. It was a cultural erasure that left a lasting legacy. By rebranding the territory, the Romans sought to suppress Jewish claims to the land and establish a new identity over this contested region. This new name endured through centuries of conquest and transformation, influencing the region's identity and setting the stage for the modern understanding of Palestine. With the spread of Christianity and later Islam, Palestine continued to attract the attention of empires. After the decline of the Roman Empire, Palestine came under Islamic rule following the conquest of Jerusalem by Caliph Umar in AD 637. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Palestine's history, one in which the region would become a center of religious significance for both Islam and Christianity. Under Islamic rule, Palestine became a part of the larger Islamic caliphates, with Jerusalem holding particular importance as a sacred city in Islam. The Ottoman Empire, which controlled Palestine from 1517 until the early 20th century, brought a new level of administrative structure and cultural influence to the region. Under Ottoman rule, Palestine saw waves of migration and the development of an Arab-Muslim identity. The Ottomans, who allowed a degree of religious diversity within their empire, maintained a delicate balance between the various religious communities in Palestine. This period also saw the growth of Palestinian identity among the Arab inhabitants of the land, a development that would later play a crucial role in the region's modern political landscape. However, the seeds of today's conflict were sown during the Ottoman period, particularly as European powers began to take interest in Palestine. The rise of Zionism, an international movement calling for the establishment of a Jewish homeland, emerged in the 19th century, largely in response to anti-Semitic persecution in Europe. This movement set the stage for increased Jewish immigration to Palestine, further intensifying the region's social and cultural dynamics. By the early 20th century, as Jewish immigrants began arriving in greater numbers, tensions with the Arab-Muslim population grew. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, issued by the British government, endorsed the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This declaration set off a chain of events that would transform the land and its people, ultimately leading to the modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The creation of the State of Israel in 1948 intensified these tensions, as Arab nations and Palestinian Arabs opposed the establishment of a Jewish state in what they considered to be Arab land. Today's struggle over Palestine is deeply rooted in this history of empires, migrations, and religious significance. The presence of various empires, each with their own interests and influences, shaped the land into a complex mosaic of cultures and beliefs. Each conqueror left a lasting imprint, contributing to the region's unique, multifaceted identity. But beyond the political and cultural layers lies a spiritual significance that continues to shape the narrative of Palestine. Jerusalem, the heart of Palestine, holds a unique place in biblical prophecy. It is often referred to in the Bible as the apple of God's eye, and is depicted as the city where God's presence dwells. Jerusalem's spiritual significance is unparalleled, making it one of the most sacred places for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But beyond its religious importance, Jerusalem is described in the Bible as a focal point for end-times prophecy, a place where the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan will take place. One of the most powerful prophecies concerning Jerusalem's role in the end times is found in the book of Zechariah. In Zechariah 12:2-3, God declares, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about." This phrase, cup of trembling, suggests that Jerusalem will be a source of great turmoil and fear, a place that will unsettle the nations. The prophecy goes on to say that Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone for all people, meaning that those who attempt to control or interfere with it will find themselves facing divine consequences. This prophecy speaks of a time when Jerusalem will become the center of global tension. Today, we see this tension as the world debates the status of Jerusalem, with both Israelis and Palestinians claiming it as their capital. This ancient city, with its narrow streets and holy sites, has become a focal point of international attention, a place where nations vie for influence and control. The prophecy of Zechariah indicates that this struggle over Jerusalem will only intensify as we approach the end times. The Bible warns that all nations will eventually gather against Jerusalem, leading to a final confrontation. In this vision, the nations of the world will attempt to lay claim to Jerusalem, but their efforts will be in vain. God himself will intervene, defending Jerusalem and bringing judgment upon those who seek to divide or control it. Another significant prophecy concerning Jerusalem is found in the book of Joel. In Joel 3 verse 2, God says, "I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. There I will put them on trial for what they did to my inheritance, my people Israel, because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land." This prophecy describes a future judgment, a day when God will gather the nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat, a place traditionally identified as being near Jerusalem. Here, God will judge the nations for their treatment of Israel and their attempts to divide the land. This prophecy resonates with modern events, as we see ongoing efforts to divide Jerusalem and the broader land of Israel between Israelis and Palestinians. The concept of a two-state solution, where Jerusalem would be shared or divided, is seen by many as a way to bring peace to the region. However, according to biblical prophecy, any attempt to divide Jerusalem will bring divine judgment. The Bible portrays Jerusalem as a city set apart for God's purposes, a place that cannot be divided or controlled by human hands. The book of Revelation also speaks of a time when the nations of the earth will gather for a final battle in the Valley of Armageddon, located in modern-day Palestine. Revelation 16 verse 16 describes this gathering, where the forces of evil will unite against God's people in a last-ditch effort to prevent the fulfillment of God's plan. This battle, known as Armageddon, is often interpreted as the climax of human history, a moment when God will intervene to bring an end to the reign of evil and establish his eternal kingdom. The prophetic significance of Jerusalem goes beyond its role as a capital or a place of worship. It is the city chosen by God, the place where King David established his throne and where Solomon built the temple. According to biblical prophecy, Jerusalem is also the city where Jesus Christ will return to reign as King of Kings. Zechariah 14 verse 4 describes a day when Jesus will stand on the Mount of Olives just outside Jerusalem and defeat the nations gathered against the city. This return of Christ will mark the end of human rule and the beginning of God's eternal kingdom, where righteousness and peace will reign. The significance of Jerusalem in biblical prophecy suggests that the struggles we see today are part of a much larger plan. The ongoing battle over Jerusalem, the debates over its status, and the desire of nations to claim it are all pieces of a divine puzzle that is leading toward a final resolution. The Bible presents Jerusalem as the city chosen by God, the focal point of his plan for humanity. It is a city that has been marked for a unique destiny, one that will ultimately lead to the fulfillment of God's promises. As we consider the modern struggles over Jerusalem, we are reminded of these ancient prophecies. The Bible tells us that Jerusalem will be a place of great tension, a city that will draw the nations of the world into conflict. Yet, it also promises that God will defend Jerusalem, that he will bring justice to his people, and that in the end, his purposes will be fulfilled. To fully grasp the origins of the conflict over Palestine, we must go back to the story of Abraham and his two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. This ancient family division, as told in the Bible, is considered by many to be the foundational source of tension that continues between their descendants, the Jews and the Arabs. Abraham, the patriarch of both lineages, received a promise from God that he would be the father of many nations and that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. Yet, as we dive deeper, we see that God's covenant was established specifically through Isaac, the son born to Abraham and Sarah. Ishmael, born to Abraham and Hagar, Sarah's maidservant, was also blessed by God, but he was not chosen to carry forth the covenant. God reassured Abraham that Ishmael would become a great nation. However, the covenant promise of the land of Canaan was made through Isaac. This division between Isaac and Ishmael, their different fates and blessings, laid the groundwork for what would become a generational struggle, one that echoes through history and continues to shape the political and spiritual landscape of the Middle East. In Genesis 16:12, there is a striking prophecy about Ishmael. He will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. This prophecy is often interpreted as a foreshadowing of the conflict that has characterized the relationship between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac. Ishmael's lineage traditionally became associated with the Arab nations, while Isaac's lineage continued through his son Jacob, whose descendants would become the 12 tribes of Israel. This conflict, rooted in the story of two brothers and their divergent destinies, is more than a political struggle. It is a spiritual battle over inheritance and divine blessing. The Bible portrays Ishmael's descendants as dwelling in the presence of all his brethren, suggesting a perpetual closeness and tension with Isaac's descendants. This relationship between Isaac and Ishmael and their respective descendants is thus seen as a foundational narrative that underpins the ongoing conflict between Jews and Arabs, particularly in the context of the land of Canaan, now known as Palestine. The tension between these two lineages is also mirrored in the story of Esau and Jacob, the twin sons of Isaac. Esau, the elder, is traditionally associated with the Edomites, another group that had frequent conflicts with Israel. Though not directly connected to the Arab-Israeli conflict, the enmity between Esau and Jacob reinforces the biblical theme of sibling rivalry over inheritance, a theme that resonates in the broader story of the Middle East. The Bible includes prophecies of judgment against Edom for opposing Israel, particularly in the book of Obadiah, which speaks of a time when Edom will face divine retribution for its role in opposing God's people. Many biblical scholars see these ancient family conflicts as a precursor to the modern Arab-Israeli conflict. Isaac's lineage would eventually form the nation of Israel, while Ishmael's descendants became the ancestors of many Arab tribes. This division, marked by blessing and rivalry, carries a weight that goes beyond human politics. For many, it signifies a spiritual struggle, one that has been woven into the history of the land itself. The connection between Isaac, Ishmael, and the ongoing conflict over Palestine is further emphasized by prophecies that mention Ishmael's descendants. Some interpret these prophecies as indications of the unique role the Arab nations will play in the unfolding of end-times events. The descendants of Ishmael are seen as part of the larger prophetic narrative, with many believing that the reconciliation of these two lineages will be a crucial step in the fulfillment of God's plan for humanity. The Bible's portrayal of Isaac and Ishmael's story offers insight into the spiritual underpinnings of the struggle over Palestine. While Isaac was chosen to carry forth the covenant, Ishmael was still blessed, and his descendants were promised greatness. This dual legacy of blessing and division, of promise and rivalry, set the stage for a complex relationship between their descendants, a relationship that remains unresolved to this day. Through this lens, the modern conflict over Palestine is not just a battle over land, but a continuation of an ancient spiritual struggle. The land of Canaan, promised to Isaac's descendants, is seen as a covenantal inheritance, a sacred gift that cannot be divided without consequence. Meanwhile, Ishmael's descendants, who have their own connection to the land, also feel entitled to this territory, resulting in a clash that is deeply rooted in both spiritual and familial ties. This eternal struggle between Isaac and Ishmael's descendants serves as a reminder of the lasting impact of family divisions and the spiritual significance of the promises made to Abraham. The Bible's account of these patriarchs and their offspring provides a profound insight into the roots of the modern-day conflict, showing that it is not merely a political issue, but a deeply spiritual and historical one, embedded in the very foundation of the region. Amidst the prophecies of conflict and judgment, the Bible also speaks of a future filled with hope, a time when ancient enmities will be set aside and peace will reign over the land. This vision of reconciliation is most vividly captured in the book of Isaiah, where the prophet describes a future where Egypt, Israel, and Assyria, representing parts of modern Palestine and the surrounding regions, will coexist in harmony. In Isaiah 19:23-25, we read a prophecy that envisions a day when these historic enemies will join together in worship, creating a bond that transcends their differences. Isaiah declares, "In that day there will be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. The Assyrians will go to Egypt and the Egyptians to Assyria. The Egyptians and Assyrians will worship together. In that day Israel will be the third, along with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing on the earth." This prophecy foresees a time of peace, a time when these nations will no longer be divided by hatred or violence, but united by their worship of God. This vision is powerful in its simplicity and scope. It speaks of a time when the people of the Middle East, including Israelis, Palestinians, and Arabs, will be reconciled, and their shared humanity will transcend the divisions that have plagued the region for centuries. The highway between Egypt and Assyria symbolizes a connection that is both physical and spiritual, a path of unity and mutual respect. This prophecy also highlights a significant shift in perspective. While many biblical passages focus on the judgment and conflicts that will occur in the region, Isaiah offers a glimpse of a future where peace is possible. This peace, however, is not something that will be achieved through human diplomacy or political treaties. According to the Bible, true reconciliation will come only when God intervenes and brings about a transformation of hearts and minds. For many, this vision of hope is a reminder that God's ultimate plan for the Middle East includes peace and unity. Despite the turmoil and violence that define the present, the Bible points to a future where enemies will become friends, where former rivals will worship together, and where the people of Israel, Egypt, and Assyria will be a blessing on the earth. This prophecy offers a message of hope to both Israelis and Palestinians, as well as to all who are affected by the ongoing conflict. It reminds us that while the struggles of today are real, they are not the final word. God's plan includes a future where peace will prevail, where the people of this land will no longer be divided by hatred or violence, but will live together in harmony. The Bible's vision of reconciliation and peace serves as a counterpoint to the darker prophecies of conflict and judgment. It reminds us that God's ultimate desire is not for division, but for unity. While the path to this future may be difficult and fraught with challenges, the promise of peace remains. This vision of a reconciled Middle East provides a powerful reminder that, despite the pain and division that have characterized this region, there is hope for a better future. The Bible's prophecies about Palestine and Jerusalem culminate in the promise of the Messiah's return. According to Christian belief, true peace in the Middle East will only come with the return of Jesus Christ, who will establish his kingdom and bring justice to all nations. This event, often referred to as the Second Coming, is seen as the ultimate resolution to the conflicts that have plagued the region for centuries. In Zechariah 14:4, we read a prophecy about the day when Jesus will return to the Mount of Olives, just outside Jerusalem. This prophecy describes how, on that day, the Mount of Olives will split in two, creating a valley that will serve as a place of refuge for God's people. This event is portrayed as the final confrontation between good and evil, a moment when God will intervene directly in human history to establish his rule over the earth. The return of the Messiah is described in the Bible as a moment of both judgment and redemption. According to Christian eschatology, Jesus will return as a conquering king, defeating the forces of evil and establishing his kingdom in Jerusalem. This kingdom will not be bound by the limitations of human governments or political boundaries. It will be a kingdom of righteousness, peace, and justice, where people of all nations will live in harmony. The book of Revelation also speaks of a time when the nations of the earth will gather for a final battle in the Valley of Armageddon, located in modern-day Palestine. Revelation 16:16 describes this gathering, where the forces of evil will unite against God's people in a last-ditch effort to prevent the fulfillment of God's plan. This battle, known as Armageddon, is often seen as the climax of human history, a moment when God will decisively intervene to bring an end to the reign of evil and establish his eternal kingdom. The return of Christ is also seen as a time of restoration for the people of Israel. According to Christian belief, Jesus will return as the Messiah of Israel, fulfilling the prophecies of the Old Testament and bringing reconciliation between God and his chosen people. This restoration will extend to all nations, creating a global community united under the rule of Christ. The promise of the Messiah's return provides a message of hope to both Israelis and Palestinians, as well as to all who long for peace in the Middle East. It reminds us that, despite the divisions and conflicts of today, there is a future where justice, peace, and reconciliation will prevail. This kingdom, described in the Bible as a place of eternal peace, offers a vision of a world free from violence and strife, where people of all backgrounds and beliefs can live together in harmony. For Christians, the return of Christ is the ultimate answer to the question of peace in the Middle East. It is a reminder that human efforts, while noble, are limited, and that true peace can only come from God. This promise of a future kingdom, ruled by a just and loving Messiah, offers a vision of hope for all who are affected by the ongoing conflict. The story of Palestine, with its layers of history, prophecy, and conflict, is a tale unlike any other. From the days of Abraham and the promise made to his descendants, to the conquest of Canaan, the rise and fall of empires, and the struggle for control of Jerusalem, this land has been at the center of a divine narrative that spans thousands of years. Its history is not just about territorial disputes or political alliances. It's about promises, judgments, and prophecies that have shaped its identity and significance. As we've explored the Bible's portrayal of Palestine, we've seen that this land is more than just soil and stone. It is a place of prophecy, a battleground for divine purposes, a land where God's promises to his people are fulfilled, and where the forces of opposition have sought to thwart his plans. From the ancient Canaanites and Philistines to the empires of Babylon, Rome, and beyond, each chapter of Palestine's history adds another layer to its role in the divine story. But perhaps the most profound aspect of this story is the hope that lies within it. Despite the conflicts and prophecies of judgment, the Bible also offers a vision of peace, a future where all people, Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, and others, can live together in harmony. This peace, however, is not something that will be achieved through human negotiation or treaties. The Bible tells us that it will come only when the Messiah returns, establishing his kingdom and bringing justice to all nations. For those who live in Palestine, Jerusalem, and the surrounding regions, this promise of peace offers a powerful reminder that the struggles of today are not the end of the story. The Bible speaks of a time when God will intervene, when the divisions that have marked this land for centuries will be healed, and when people of all backgrounds will come together in worship and unity. This is a vision that transcends politics, a vision that offers hope for a future free from violence, fear, and suffering. As you reflect on the story of Palestine, I invite you to consider the significance of this land in the context of biblical prophecy. The events we see today may seem chaotic and senseless, but the Bible assures us that they are part of a larger plan, a divine narrative that is moving toward a final resolution. The struggles over Palestine, the debates over Jerusalem, and the ongoing conflicts are all pieces of a divine puzzle, one that will ultimately lead to the fulfillment of God's purposes. This journey through Palestine's history and prophecy reveals that the story of this land is far from over. Each event, each struggle, and each moment of peace is part of a grand design, a story that is moving toward a future where God's promises will be fully realized. The Bible tells us that, in the end, peace will come to this land, not through human efforts, but through the return of the Messiah, who will bring justice, peace, and reconciliation to all peoples, including the Palestinians and Israelis. As you think about this story, ask yourself, what role do I play in this divine narrative? How do I respond to the prophecies and promises that surround this land? Whether you are a believer, a seeker, or simply someone who is curious about the Bible's view on Palestine, the story of this land invites us all to look beyond the headlines, to see the spiritual dimensions of the conflict, and to consider the possibility of a future shaped by God's love and justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the biblical story of Palestine. We hope this exploration has given you a deeper understanding of the prophetic significance of this land and the hope that lies within it. As we await the fulfillment of these promises, let us hold on to the vision of peace that the Bible offers. A vision of unity, justice, and reconciliation that transcends the divisions of our world. Please like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to this channel.